I have told this story maybe 4 times in my life. Once to a review board that wanted the facts and nothing else. Once to my brother, who did not believe me. And twice to myself, alone in the dark, trying to figure out where it actually started. Because everyone thinks the war started with the fleets, with the fire over Kessa Minor, with the sound a planet makes when its sky peels open. It didn't. It started in a quiet room, with a cup of water, and a man who was too proud to raise his voice. Let me tell you what I saw. I was there. I was standing close enough to hear him breathe. My name doesn't matter much anymore. Back then I was a junior attaché, 29 years old. I carried folders. I translated the small stuff, the boring stuff, the words nobody remembers. I made sure the ambassador had his notes in the right order and his collar straight before he walked into rooms full of people who wanted him dead in a polite kind of way. The ambassador's name was Idris Malhan. You have probably heard the name since. They put it on a ship. They put it on a building on Earth. But back then, before all of it, he was just my boss. A tired man in his late 50s with gray at his temples and a habit of tapping his thumb against his ring finger when he was thinking. He drank tea, never coffee. He remembered the names of everyone's children, even the janitors. He had this way of listening to you like you were the only person in the galaxy who mattered, and it wasn't a trick. He actually meant it. We were stationed on Harmon's Reach. If you've never seen it, picture a station the size of a small moon, hanging in the black between 3 empires that all hated each other and needed somewhere neutral to shout. It was old, older than any human treaty. The corridors curved the wrong way for our eyes, built for species that were taller than us, or wider, or that walked on more legs than we had. The lights were always a little too orange. The air always smelled faintly of copper and something floral I could never place. You got used to it. You got used to everything out there, eventually. That was the whole job, getting used to things that were never meant for you. We were there for one reason, the Sethari. I need you to understand the Sethari to understand what happened. And I need you to understand them without hating them yet, the way I did before that day. They were beautiful in a way that made your stomach drop, tall, a head and a half above the tallest man I ever met, gray skin, almost silver under the right light, with these fine dark markings running down the sides of their throats like someone had painted them with a single confident stroke. Their eyes were black all the way through, no white. When a Sethari looked at you, you couldn't tell where they were looking. You only knew they saw you completely. And they were old, not individually, as a people. They had been crossing the stars for 11,000 years before humanity figured out fire could be useful for more than staying warm. They had rules for everything. Rules for how to greet. Rules for how to eat. Rules for how to insult someone so precisely that the insult would still sting 3 generations later. Their whole culture ran on one thing, standing where you stood. How high, who bowed to whom, and how deep and for how long. To the Sethari, a person's worth was a physical fact, measurable, visible, like height, like the length of a shadow. And to the Sethari, we humans had no standing at all. We were new, we were small. We had crawled out of one dirty little planet and started demanding to be treated like equals, and to them that was funny. The way a child in a grown man's coat is funny. We hadn't earned a shadow yet. That's how their old proverb went, one of the linguists told me once. A young species casts no shadow, meaning you're not real to us, not yet. You haven't lived long enough to block the light. Ambassador Malhan was there to change that. Not the whole thing. Nobody's that arrogant. He was there for one narrow, specific, difficult thing, a trade corridor. There was a run of dead space, unclaimed, that both of us wanted access to. For us it was survival. 3 of our colonies sat on the far side of it, and the long way around took 11 months. Through the corridor it was 3 weeks. 11 months meant babies born before their fathers could get home, meant medicine arriving after the patient was already in the ground. 3 weeks meant those colonies could actually live instead of just holding on. For the Sethari, the corridor was nothing, a stretch of empty they'd flown through 1,000 times and never bothered to name. That was the whole cruelty of it. What was life and death to us was a rounding error to them. Malhin had been working on it for 2 years. 2 years of small meetings. 2 years of gifts sent and received. 2 years of learning to hold his fork the Sethari way and bow the exact number of degrees and never, ever show that his knees hurt from standing so long in their too tall rooms. And it was working. That's the part people forget. It was actually working. The general who would eventually break everything was named Sarivo Khan. The meeting where it happened was supposed to be the good one, the one where they said yes. I remember the morning. I remember it too well. Malhin woke up before I did. When I came to his quarters with his schedule, he was already dressed, standing at the viewport, watching a Sethari freighter drift past. He had his tea in both hands, steam on the glass. "They're going to say yes today," he told me. He didn't turn around. "I can feel it. 2 years and today they finally see us." I told him I'd bring the corridor charts. "Bring the good ones," he said. "The colored ones. Khan likes color, did you know that? For a soldier he has a painter's eye." He smiled a little. "You spend enough time with a man, you learn what he loves." He thought they were becoming something like friends, him and the general. Two hard men from two hard peoples, finding respect across the gap. He was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. Neither did he. The meeting hall on Harmon's Reach was called the Low Chamber, which was a joke because the ceiling was so high you couldn't see it. It vanished up into shadow. The Sethari built up, always up. Height was everything to them, remember. The higher your seat, the higher you're standing. They put us on a bench near the floor, Malhin and me and 2 others from our delegation, our knees near our chests, looking up. General Khan came in last. He didn't walk, not the way we walk. He moved like water finding its level, like he had all the time that had ever existed and none of it could touch him. His uniform was that deep Sethari gray, almost black, with a single band of silver at the throat. No medals. The Sethari don't wear medals. Everyone already knows what you've done. Wearing proof would be an insult to the people who watched you do it. He took the highest seat. Of course he did. And he looked down at us with those black eyes, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped. Malhin stood, bowed the exact degree, held it the exact length. And then he began to speak. "I want you to know he was good. God, he was good. I have heard a lot of powerful people talk in my life before and since, and Idris Malhin was the best I ever heard. He spoke in the Sethari trade tongue which almost no human could manage, all those clicks and long vowels that hurt the throat. He spoke about the corridor, about the 3 weeks and the 11 months. He didn't beg. That was the thing. He never once begged. He laid it out like a gift. Here is a thing that costs you nothing and saves us everything. Let us both be larger for it." And I watched Khan's face. Those black eyes, I couldn't read him. Nobody could read a Sethari. But I honestly thought I saw something soften, a tilt of the head, a stillness that felt like listening. Malhin finished. He bowed again, he sat. There was a long silence. And then General Sarivo Khan did the thing that started the war. He rose. He came down from his high seat, slowly, one long step at a time, until he was standing on the chamber floor with us, which no Sethari of his rank ever did, and for one bright second I thought, this is it, this is the moment, he's coming down to meet us as equals. And then he walked to Malhin. He stood over him, 2 heads taller, close, too close, and he reached out one long gray hand and he took the cup of water that sat by the ambassador's elbow. And he poured it on the floor, at Malhin's feet. Slowly, deliberately, every drop. He held the cup upside down until it was empty, and then a little longer, watching the last bead of water fall, and the sound of it hitting the stone was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Nobody moved. I didn't understand. I'm ashamed to say I didn't understand what I was seeing. I thought maybe it was a ritual. A blessing, some old Sethari thing. It wasn't. Later, the linguist explained it to me, and I have never forgotten a word. Among the Sethari there is a gesture. You do it to a thing that has no standing, a servant who has failed, an animal, a child who has spoken out of turn. You take the water you would have offered a guest because offering water is how they say I see you, I recognize you, you are real, and you pour it on the ground instead. And what it means is this. You are not a guest, you are not an equal, you are not even a person to me. You are a stain on my floor and I am washing you away. He did it in front of everyone, in front of the other delegations, in front of the recording drones that carried it back to a dozen worlds. He did it to a man who had spent 2 years learning to respect him. And then General Khan set the empty cup down, gently, and he said, in flawless human speech, because he could speak our language perfectly, he had simply never once bothered to before. A young species casts no shadow. Come back when you have lived long enough to matter. And he turned and walked back up to his high seat and sat down and looked at the next delegation like we had already ceased to exist. I have thought about the next 30 seconds more than any 30 seconds of my life. Because here is what I expected. I expected Malhan to break. He was a proud man, a tired man. I expected his face to crumble or his voice to shake or his hands. I braced for it. I got ready to be ashamed for him. That's not what happened. Idris Malhan looked down at the puddle of water at his feet for a long moment. His thumb tapped once against his ring finger. Then he looked up at the general, and he smiled, this small, sad, terrible smile. And he stood, and he bowed, the exact degree, the exact length, perfect, flawless. He gave that monster a bow so precise that it was, in its own way, the most violent thing in the room, because it said, I know the rules better than you thought. I am not the animal here. I am simply choosing not to be one. And then in the Sethari trade tongue, clear enough for every recording drone in the chamber, he said one sentence. He said, we will remember the water. That was all. He gathered his charts, the colored ones. He handed them to me without looking, and his hand was steady, steadier than mine, and we walked out of the low chamber with our backs straight and our steps even, and not one of us ran. I didn't understand what he meant. We will remember the water. I thought it was grief. I thought it was a broken man saying something small to keep from screaming. I was so wrong. I was so completely wrong about what kind of man I was standing next to. Here is what most people don't know, the part that never made the recordings. That night Malhan didn't rage, he didn't drink, he didn't call Earth screaming for a fleet. He sat in his quarters in the dark at the small desk, and he wrote. I brought him tea around the 3rd hour, and he waved me in and told me to sit, and I sat. And for a long time he just wrote and I just watched. His pen, he used an actual pen, an old one, real ink, because he said a man should feel his own words drag across the page. His pen moved slow and even. Finally he spoke. He didn't look up. Do you know why they win the Sethari? He asked me. I said no. Because they think time is on their side. They think they're old and we're young, and therefore they will always be one step ahead. 11,000 years. He set the pen down. And you know what 11,000 years does to people? It makes them lazy. It makes them so sure they already know the ending that they stop reading the story. He looked at me then. His eyes were wet, but his voice was iron. Khan poured that water because he was bored. That's all. He wanted to feel large for an afternoon. He never once imagined I might do something about it. Because in 11,000 years, no one small ever has. I asked him what he was writing. He picked the pen back up. The report, he said, the honest one, not the diplomatic one, the one where I tell them exactly what he said and exactly what it means and exactly what happens if we let it stand. He was quiet for a moment. If we bow to this, we bow to everything after it, every world we colonize, every ship we send. They'll pour the water on all of it, forever, because we let them do it once and called it patience. He wrote through the night. I found out later what was in that report. It went straight past the diplomatic corps, past the trade office. Malhin had a code, an old one, that put things directly in front of the people who actually decided things. He almost never used it. In 30 years, he'd used it twice. He used it that night. And in it, he didn't ask for war. That's the thing nobody believes. He didn't. He asked for one thing. He asked them to look, just look. He attached the recording, the water, the cup. A young species casts no shadow. And then he wrote, and I've read the transcript. They released it after. It's carved on the wall of the building they named after him. I have spent 2 years teaching them to respect us with words. I was wrong. Some doors only open when you stop knocking. I am one old man and my pride is not worth a war. But this was not done to me. It was done to all of us, and it was recorded so that all of us would know it. And if we let it stand, then we have told them and told ourselves that we can be humiliated and do nothing. I do not know what we are as a people, but I know what we are not. We are not a stain to be washed away. Look at the recording, then decide who we are. He sent it, and then he slept for 4 hours, and then the 72 began. The first day nothing happened. That's how these things go. The galaxy is enormous and slow. A recording has to travel. Decisions have to be made. Old men in far rooms have to be woken up. But something was happening. We just couldn't see it yet. The recording got out. It wasn't supposed to, but these things never stay put. Someone on the station leaked it, or one of the other delegations passed it along, and within a day it was everywhere. Every human colony, every ship, every dirty little outpost on the edge of nowhere where people had scraped a living out of nothing and knew exactly what it felt like to be told they didn't count. And they watched the waterfall. I've talked to people since. People who saw it that first day, light years away in a mess hall or a mining bay or a school, and they all say the same thing. They say it wasn't rage, not at first. It was recognition. Every human who had ever been made to feel small looked at Idris Malhin standing in that too-low seat, getting water poured at his feet, and thought, I know exactly what that feels like. We are not an old species, but we are a species that remembers being small. It's practically all we've ever been. Small on our own planet at the mercy of weather and disease. Small in our own solar system, one blue dot. Small out there in the dark, the newcomers, the children, the ones who cast no shadow. And here's the thing about a species that remembers being small. It never, ever forgets how to fight back. On the station, the second day, the Sethari acted like nothing had happened. That was almost the worst part. General Khan attended 2 more meetings. He was, by all accounts, in an excellent mood. One of the other attachés told me he'd been overheard telling a subordinate that the human matter was resolved, that we'd been shown our place, and would now, in his words, settle. He genuinely thought it was over. He thought he'd won. I saw him once, that second day, in one of the curving orange corridors. He came around the bend with 2 of his officers, all 3 of them tall and gray and moving like the corridor belonged to them, and I froze against the wall the way you do. And Khan saw me, and he knew who I was, Malhin's attaché, and I'll never forget this, he gave me the smallest nod, almost kind, the way you'd nod at a whipped dog that had finally learned to stay down. I didn't nod back. I couldn't have told you why then. I just held his gaze, those black eyes, for 1 second longer than I should have. And then he was gone, and I was shaking, and I hated myself for shaking. But I didn't look away first. I want that on the record, small as it was, I didn't look away. Malhin spent that second day the way he spent every day, working. He held his scheduled meetings. He was calm, courteous, exact. If you didn't know, you'd never have guessed anything had happened. He drank his tea. He remembered everyone's children's names. At one point I asked him, I couldn't help it, whether he thought the report would matter, whether anyone back home would actually do anything. He considered it for a long time. I don't know, he said finally. I've done my part. I looked at the water and I didn't bow to it, and I told the truth about what it was. That's all one man can do. The rest belongs to everyone else now. He set down his cup. That's what people never understand about us, our people. We're not strong because of any one of us. Any one of us is weak. I'm an old man who got water poured on his shoes, but you put enough of us in a room, enough of us looking at the same thing at the same time and thinking no, he shook his head. The Sethari have never seen that. Not from us. They've only ever seen us one at a time, small and polite and asking. They have no idea what we look like when we all decide at once. I didn't know it then, but back home, the deciding had already begun. They released the timeline later. I've studied it. The way it moved is almost frightening. The recording reached Earth's governing council on the first day. They watched it in silence. Someone, it's not recorded who, apparently stood up halfway through and left the room and was sick. The military didn't push for war. That's the part that gets rewritten in the retellings. It wasn't the generals. The generals wanted caution. They ran the numbers and the numbers were bad. The Sethari outmatched us in every measurable way. Older ships, more of them, weapons we'd only theorized about. Any general worth the name looks at those numbers and says not yet, not this, we can't win. And they were right. On paper we couldn't win. But it didn't go to the generals, not first. It went to the people. The recording was already everywhere by the second day, remember. And the councils, the assemblies, the colony governments, they all felt the same thing rising under them at the same time. This enormous, quiet, terrible pressure. Not a mob. Nothing so loud. Just millions and then billions of ordinary people looking at the same 40 seconds of footage and arriving, one by one, at the same word. No. Not we should, not we might. Just no. No, this does not stand. No, we are not a stain. No, we will not settle. It came up from the mining colonies and the farm worlds and the crowded stations, from the people who knew being small in their bones, and it pushed up through every layer of government until it reached the top, and the people at the top looked at it and understood that they didn't actually have a choice. You can't govern a people who have already decided. You can only get in front of them and try to look like you're leading. On the third day, the vote was called. It wasn't close. I was with Malhin when word came through. It was late station time. He was at his desk going over, of all things, the corridor charts. The colored ones, still trying to solve it. Even then, even after everything, some part of him still believed there might be a version of the future where the 3 weeks won and the 11 months lost and nobody had to die for it. The message came in on the old code, his private channel. He saw the marker and went very still. He read it once, his face didn't change. He read it again. Then he set the pad down, and he took off his glasses, and he pressed his fingers against his eyes. And for the first and only time in all the years I knew him, I watched Idris Malhin cry. Not from joy. Understand that. There was no joy in it. He cried the way you cry when something you set in motion has grown so much larger than you, and you realize you can't call it back, and you were right that it needed doing, but you'll carry the weight of it for the rest of your life. They voted, he said. His voice was thick. All of them, every world. He laughed, this broken little sound. Khan poured a cup of water, and he couldn't finish. Then he stood up, and he squared his shoulders, and he became the ambassador again, the whole man, iron all the way through. I have to deliver it, he said. That's my job. I opened this door. I'll be the one to walk through it. He looked at me. Get me my good coat. The declaration of war between humanity and the Sethari Dominion was delivered by hand, in person, by one tired old man in a good coat, 72 hours after a cup of water hit the floor. They led him back into the low chamber. I think Khan allowed it as a courtesy, expecting what? An apology, a plea, a human come crawling back to accept his place. Whatever he expected, he wanted an audience for it. The chamber was full, all the delegations, all the drones. Khan sat in his high seat. Malhin stood on the low floor, same as before. Nothing had changed in the room. Everything had changed everywhere else. Malhin didn't bow this time. That was the first thing. Everyone in the chamber noticed it. A murmur went through the Sethari benches like wind through grass. The human hadn't bowed. It broke every rule. It was unthinkable. He just stood there, straight, and he looked up at the general with those tired eyes, and he waited until the whole chamber was silent, and then he spoke. In our language, English, not the Sethari trade tongue. He never used their language again as long as he lived. "General Khan," he said, "3 days ago you poured water on the floor and told me my people cast no shadow. You told me to come back when we had lived long enough to matter." He paused. "I've come back." And he took a single sheet of paper from inside his coat. Real paper, the declaration printed plain. "I represent 11 billion people across 41 worlds," he said, "and I have been sent to deliver a message. It is short. We spent a long time making it short, so that even a species as certain of itself as yours could not misunderstand it." He held up the paper. He didn't read from it. He'd memorized it. He looked Sarivo Khan in his black eyes and he said, "You measured us by our age and found us small. You were not wrong. We are young. We are small. We have crossed the stars for less than 300 years and you have crossed them for 11,000. By every measure you value, you are our superior and we do not dispute it." A pause. "But you made one error. You believe that because we are young, we do not know what we are. You believe that a young species has no shadow. General, a shadow is not a thing you are given by age. A shadow is a thing you cast when you finally stand between someone and their light. And you have spent 11,000 years so high above everyone that you have forgotten the smaller creatures can stand too." He set the paper down on the low table, right where the cup of water had been. "This is a declaration of war," he said simply. "It was voted by every human world. It was not my decision. I want you to understand that. I am not important enough to start a war. None of us are, one at a time. That is the thing you never learned about us. We are nothing, one at a time." He looked around the silent chamber. "But we counted, all 11 billion of us, and we all said the same word, and here it is." Silence total. I could hear my own heart. And Malhin looked back up at the general, and he said the last thing. "You poured out the water, General, because you thought it would humiliate us. Instead, you showed us exactly what you think we are. And a species does not go to war over pride, but it will go to war, every one of us all at once, for as long as it takes, over the right to cast a shadow." He almost smiled. "Come down, if you like. Come down to the floor and pour out another cup. We'll still be standing here. We'll just be standing here with a war behind us." And then Idris Malhin turned his back on the highest-ranking soldier of the oldest empire in the galaxy, and he walked out of the low chamber, and I walked out behind him, and this time the whole chamber watched us go in a silence so deep it felt like the station itself was holding its breath. You want to know what Khan did? He said nothing. For a long time he said nothing at all. The recordings show it. He sat in his high seat and he looked at that plain sheet of paper on the low table where the water had been, and something moved across his face that no human had ever seen on a Sethari before. It wasn't fear, it was bigger than fear. It was the look of a man who has just realized he read the ending wrong, who has been so sure of the story for so long that he stopped reading and looked up and found that all the small creatures he never counted had counted themselves and were standing. 11,000 years, and no one small had ever fought back. Now 11 billion small ones had, all at once, over a cup of water and the right to cast a shadow. The war was terrible. I won't lie to you and make it a clean story. We lost worlds. We lost Kessa Minor in the first year, and I still can't say that name without seeing the footage. We lost more people than I can hold in my head. The numbers were bad on paper, and the paper was right about a lot of it. But the numbers were wrong about the one thing that mattered. They measured ships and guns and years. They never found a way to measure what a young species does when it finally, all at once, decides that it will not be washed away. We didn't fight like the old empires. We had no 11,000 years of doctrine. We improvised. We adapted. We did the things you do when you've spent your whole existence being small and scared and clever because clever is all you had. And it turned out that 11,000 years of being certain is a kind of weakness, and 300 years of being terrified is a kind of strength. And the Sethari never saw it coming because they'd stopped reading the story a long, long time ago. It took 9 years. I won't walk you through all of it. That's a different telling and a longer one, and I'm too old to do it justice tonight. But I'll tell you how it ended, because it ended where it started. It ended in a low room, with a cup of water. When the Dominion finally sued for peace, they sent Khan, older now, some of that terrible certainty gone from his face, and the humans who received the surrender. I wasn't there, but I've seen the recording so many times I could tell you where every drone was standing. The humans set out a table, and on the table they set 2 cups of water, one for their side, one for his. And they waited to see what he would do. For a long moment, the old general looked at the water, and everyone in that room knew what the gesture would mean if he refused it, and everyone knew what it would mean if he drank. Sarivo Khan reached out one long gray hand. And he drank. I see you, I recognize you, you are real. 11,000 years, and the oldest empire in the galaxy finally learned to see a shadow that hadn't existed a decade before. Idris Malhan didn't live to see it. He died in the 4th year, not in battle, his heart in his sleep at his desk, with the corridor charts still spread out in front of him, the colored ones, still trying even then to find the version of the future where nobody had to die for 3 weeks instead of 11 months. They gave him a state funeral. Every world sent someone. They named a ship after him, and then a class of ships, and then a building on Earth with his last honest words carved into the wall. But I don't think about the ship, or the building, or the words on the wall. I think about a tired old man in the dark, with a real pen, choosing not to be an animal in a room built to make him feel like one. I think about that small, sad, terrible smile. I think about "We will remember the water," said so quiet I thought it was grief, when it was actually a promise. People ask me sometimes whether it was worth it. 9 years, all those worlds, all those names, over a cup of water and a proud old soldier's afternoon of boredom. And I never know how to answer because the question is wrong. It wasn't over the water. It was over what the water meant. They poured us out onto the floor because they thought we were nothing. And we stood up, all of us, all at once, small as we were, and we told them, "You don't get to decide what we are. Not you, not your 11,000 years, not your high seats and your rules and your certainty. We decide. And we have decided that we are not a stain to be washed away." That's the whole story. That's all it ever was. A young species casts no shadow, the old general said. He was right that day. We didn't have one yet. So we made one. Together. All 11 billion of us. And we cast it so long and so dark that it fell across 11,000 years of empire and made an old, certain, careless people finally look down and see us, standing,